I'm joined today by George Christie, who's former president of the Ventura Chapter of the Hells Angels and also founder of Felony Prison Consultants. George, it's so great to have you on. For people who are not familiar with the Hells Angels, they may only hear about the Hells Angels as a motorcycle club. They may only hear about the Hells Angels as a sort of pseudo-criminal group. What is the truth, as someone who can speak to this with personal experience, about what the Hells Angels is?
Well, the Hells Angels is a motorcycle brotherhood, and depending who you discuss the topic with, what law enforcement agency, the federal government says we're a criminal organization. We've now have gone international. The local cops continually do us as a street gang because it suits their law. So depending on what the agenda is for that particular law enforcement agency, you're going to get a different definition. But law enforcement all has made allegations for years that we're a criminal organization. This started in the mid to early 70s. And then ultimately there was, in 1979, there was a racketeering trial in Northern California, and the government failed to prove their case.
And there have been, as you mentioned, a number of different allegations about criminal activity. Many have never been substantiated or proven. And at the same time, there have been convictions for everything from drug dealing, trafficking of stolen goods, etc. Is your talk to me about whether you see the activities of individuals who are part of a Hells Angels chapter as separate from the activities of the group or as part of the group? In other words, do you see it as the group is involved in activities as an organization, or that it sort of just so happens that some of the individuals who are part of this motorcycle brotherhood are engaged on their own time in activities that may or may not be legal?
Well, I think the record speaks for itself. They've never been able to clump us in one sum. I think the racketeering trial in '79 proved that it was just a terrible waste of money and a monumental failure for the government. So they, discontinued coming after us like that because it hasn't been successful. And, I can tell you that the club goes out of its way to make sure people don't discuss illegal activities, and as an organization don't participate in illegal acts. Now, what individual members do on their own time, with their own associates, the record speaks for itself, and I won't make excuses for that. But in any organization, you're going to have issues like that. You can go to the state Senate, the United States Senate, Congress, American Medical Association, pharmaceutical companies, banks, whatever it may be. You've got individuals that like to take shortcuts, and they look at some of these illegal activities not as illegal activities. They look at them as perks of the industry they're in. And depending on who you speak to, law is a matter of interpretation sometimes. And I'm certainly not saying, somebody that goes out and commits an overt criminal act and, there's no excuse for it, is seeing that as a perk. But some people do justify it in that manner.
So talk to us a little bit about, in 1976, you were in the Los Angeles charter. In 1978, you founded the Ventura Charter. What were the on-the-record activities of the Ventura chapter?
Well, I think we should go back to Los Angeles because there were some monumental things that happened down there.
Okay.
We ultimately wound up getting in a conflict with the Mongols Motorcycle Club, a conflict that is still thriving today. There's recently, is maybe 12 months ago, individuals were shot and killed, in a chance meeting on the I-15 freeway. So there was bombings, there were shootings, people went to prison. We made a move to Ventura in 78. And there was a lot of things that happened over that 35-year period. I, you know, saw members arrested and convicted. I saw members arrested and acquitted. I also saw the clubhouse come under attack. There were allegations and suspicions that the federal government, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms people, had thrown a hand grenade in there after the 1984 Olympics. We traced the spoon of the grenade back to Akron, Ohio, which happened to be the same area that the ATF squad had come out to do security for the 1984 Olympics. So, it goes back and forth on both sides, but there's been some convictions, and like I said, there's also been some acquittals. If you want to cite something specific, I'll certainly be more than happy to address it.
Well, I will get to that. How does a motorcycle brotherhood chapter, like the Ventura chapter, for example, make money? Because when you read online about your past and about the charter, you read about the club's business operations, and that term is often not made more specific. How is the chapter making money? What are the proceeds coming from?
Well, the individuals work for themselves. Most of the individuals, have to support themselves. There's a lot of guys in construction. There's a lot of professional people. I was a small business owner. I owned several businesses. I owned a tattoo shop, a bail bonds business, a t-shirt business, a martial arts business. So, I had a lot of different things going. I had a concert promotion business for a while. But the way the money comes in specifically to the charter or the club itself is through dues and benefits, things of that nature.
And I'm fascinated about the tattoo business because that connects to the 18 months you spent in prison just a couple of years ago. And I want to get to that. But before we do, in 2011, you ultimately resigned your presidency of the Ventura Charter after, as you said, many decades. And
Yes.
you were excommunicated by your former brothers. Talk to us about the circumstances of you leaving and why it happened the way it did.
Well, I think that I had reached a point in time that I had felt and was starting to feel that we had become the people we rebelled against. And, there were two sets of rules, a set of rules for the elite members, which, was the leadership. And then there was a set of rules for the general membership. And I started addressing these things. And I became disillusioned, and I walked into a meeting and resigned. We were also in conflicts with every major motorcycle club in the United States and abroad, and we're about to engage in another problem with the Vagos Motorcycle Club, who we'd had a long relationship with since the late 60s and had usually gotten along with them. And, the Vagos petitioned me. They said they wanted to know what the problem was, and I couldn't get to the root of it. And the group of members that felt they had a problem with the Vagos no longer saw the vision I saw. And I think if you're a leader and if you're a good leader, you have a vision. And if that vision is only seen by you, then maybe you're not a leader anymore. So I reevaluated, where I was going and what I wanted to do. And I felt that if I did stay in the club, I certainly could have stayed in the club, but it would have strictly been for my ego. And I've never been one to not speak my mind. So I walked into a meeting, I resigned, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I became the subject of a social media smear campaign, which I found kind of amusing. We're supposed to be this secret organization, and now suddenly we're involving people on social media, not only to attack me, but to club business and situations that happened. And I just found the whole thing kind of ironic.
Let me remind everybody we're speaking with George Christie, former president of the Hells Angels Ventura Chapter. We're going to go to a break on our radio and television program. We're going to continue our conversation with George Christie, and the full conversation will be posted to our YouTube channel. So, George, I'm so fascinated in the logistics of this. You say you were petitioned by the Vagos. How does this happen in the world of motorcycle clubs? Does it happen via email? Do you get someone who shows up at your door and says, we want answers for you on this? I mean, what are the logistics of that?
Well, the Vagos and I had a long standing relationship, and I happened to run into them by just coincidence. And I approached them, and it was somewhat tense. I was by myself. There was probably 25 or 30 of them, and we started talking. We felt we'd open up a new line of dialogue and try to resolve the different issues. But within 2 months after I left, there was a Hells Angel killed in a gunfight, and then a Vago, I think, was also killed.
And when when these conflicts arise between motorcycle clubs, what are they generally over?
Well, it could be over anything. It could be, over a insult, whether real or imagined. It could be over a woman. It could be over somebody moving and encroaching on somebody else's territory. And there always seems to be, the first thing law enforcement will say is they're fighting over drug turf. And I can honestly say I've never really seen that happen. People, egos are more, they're more interested in their egos in their pocketbook. And when somebody's ego gets bruised, that's when conflicts usually follow.
So you've done a couple of stints in prison. From 2013 to 2014, you spent 18 months in prison for charges related to conspiring to firebomb 2 Ventura tattoo shops. And as you mentioned, one of your businesses was a tattoo shop. Is that, talk to us about that a little bit. I mean, now looking back.
Well, I just want to set the record straight. What I did was I spent years on house arrest, and then I did a year in prison in Texas. I was recovering from hip replacements. So I spent 2 years on house arrest, and then ultimately went to Texas for a year. And the allegation was that I had ordered the firebombing of 2 tattoo shops.
Presumably competitor tattoo shops to yours, as the story is told.
That's what the government's position was. My position was that I would order the fire bombings or any interference in the 2 tattoo shops that were the targets of this crime's business. But there were 2 members that got involved, and one of them came up with this idea to firebomb them. And there's an FBI 302 that states I told him to stay away from the tattoo shops, but he also said in the same 302 that he knew what I was thinking, and an inference that he knew what I really wanted, even though I said that's not what I wanted.
So to paraphrase, to make sure I understand correctly, you're saying that based on the testimony of this associate, he admits that on the record, you officially said, stay away from these tattoo shops, but he inferred that you were implying to actually go after the tattoo shops.
Yes, he said what I really wanted was for someone to take it upon themselves to go after the tattoo shops, which, myself and my legal team found ludicrous. And, we started chipping away at that. And, in 2011, I was indicted, and then in 2013, we impaneled a jury and we got ready to start trial. And Judge Wu made it clear that he thought that the government's case wasn't what they thought. And then indeed, he looked at me and said, and you, Mr. Christie, he said, God only knows what you've gotten away with for the last 35 years. And he says, I think, we need to come to some sort of agreement here. And he sent us down to Judge Walter's chambers to talk and to negotiate something. And what they decided was 0 to 5 years. I would have to take my chances with the judge just sentencing me, and that's what we agreed to.
And George, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. Are you saying that part of this agreement that was ultimately reached was not necessarily for what could be proved with regard to these fire bombings, but sort of under the understanding that over the last several decades, there's a whole bunch of stuff you could have gotten in trouble for that you didn't, and they said we sort of want to make good for everything that you may or may not have done?
Well, I think the judge was speaking, in general terms. I don't think he was. This was a real fair judge and a real smart judge, and I don't think he thought for 1 minute that he could sentence me for anything he suspected me of doing. But
Sure.
what he was saying is, I guess maybe I looked a little disappointed. I thought that the 2 years on house arrest would be sufficient, and that he would give me some more additional time on house arrest. And when he said, no, I'm going to send you to prison for a year, we were a little disappointed. And I think that was just an overture to me to, quit my whining and take my medicine.
Is it true that you had gotten away with a lot of stuff over the decades preceding that?
Well, I leave that to everyone's imagination. I'm not going to comment on that. But
You're
I
certainly
will
not
tell
denying
you.
it, though. You're not denying it.
Well, let's just say there's a lot of things happened over 4 decades that I don't want to get specific about. I tried to learn from my mistakes as I went along, but there was a lot of conflicts. There was a lot of things that transpired, and I'm writing a book. It's going to be out next year. I'm going to reveal some of these things that maybe they thought I was doing, and when they were looking the other way, I did something else. But that'll all be in the memoir that's going to come out next year. One of the interesting things the judge do was, in the federal system, courts like you to take responsibility. So you stand before the judge and you make what they call an allocution, and you admit your crime and talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And when I got up, I read a statement. Well, I actually memorized it and read it from memory to Judge Wu and to the court. And if you go to my website, that allocution's on my website. But what I did was, I wouldn't accept responsibility for directly ordering anybody to firebomb the businesses. But what I did accept responsibility for was poor leadership. And Judge Wu seemed to accept that. The U.S. attorneys, I don't think they were the happiest campers, but, I wasn't either. So, and that's one of the things Judge Wu said to us. He goes, it's obvious the government's disappointed. And he said, it's obvious Mr. Christie's disappointed. And he thinks that's a good agreement when both parties are disappointed. So,
yeah, the old adage that a good compromise leaves everybody sort of disappointed. In the last few minutes we have left, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about what prison is like for someone of sort of stature within a motorcycle brotherhood like the Hells Angels. You can read about how white collar criminals do in prisons that they tend to spend time in. You can read about how child molesters do in the prisons they tend to spend time in. Is the experience different for someone who is a president of a motorcycle brotherhood or former president than for just your average inmate?
It absolutely is different for someone in my position. It's the same thing with mob guys. Traditional La Cosa Nostra members go into prison. They're treated very well. When I got to La Tuna prison, the banditos were waiting for me. One of the bandito leaders had a cell for me. I shared a cell with him. And, it was an easy time for me there. I had known this particular guy for 35 years. We were certainly in different clubs, but we had developed a relationship over the years from negotiating through conflicts. I had developed a close relationship with the banditos, and I respect them to this day. Had a lot of fun with them, and there were conflicts over the years, but they respected me. I respected them. So when I got there, they had a cell for me. I celled with this particular bandito leader. We had a great time, as good a time as you can have in prison. But you're correct. Somebody with a sex offense goes into prison. It's a really rough time for them. And the federal government now, it's different than it was years ago. They're filled with sex offenders because of this internet. These guys get on the internet and find these different sites, and some of them are illegal, some of them are run by the government. And what they do is they'll send you emails and draw people into breaking the law. So you've got the federal government housing all these sex offenders, and it creates a problem for them.
And George, as someone now who I obviously understand how you would much rather have an easier time in prison than a harder time. Obviously, anybody would. As someone now who works with people and consults with people that are in the criminal justice system, do you think that from a systemic point of view, it's fair that it's different for you in prison than for someone who is not of your stature or background? Is that something that we should think is a correct thing about the criminal justice system?
No, I think that I understand the basis of your question, but I find it kind of ludicrous in a way, because society in general is set up that way. We're all supposed to be equal, but we certainly aren't. And whether people want to admit it or not, there's a class structure in the United States.
Sure.
And do I think it's fair? No, but it is the way it is. And I tried to in the prison. I even got in some confrontations and verbal conflicts with some of the inmates, because I felt like some of these guys that were in there for these sex crimes had been sucked into it. And the traditional hardcore prison guys, they don't see these guys in anything other than child molesters, and they don't want to interact with them. They run them off the yard. They make them lock up in their cells, and sometimes they make them go lock up in protective custody. It's a real rough time for sex offenders in there. There's a lot of white collar criminals in there, and they have a lot easier time than the sex offenders do, but it's not as easy for them either. You got a prison filled with drug dealers, murderers, cartel members. There's a lot of people from the cartels up from Mexico. What happens is a lot of these defendants, they wind up getting angry at their lawyers because they don't understand why their lawyers can't make all these miracles happen like they see on television. Well, the judicial system's not that way. The judicial system is weights and measures, and it's not always justice that prevails in these trials. And the federal government, they claim and brag about a 98% conviction rate. Well, that's because they put so much time on you that everybody's willing to plead out. It's like myself. I was looking at 3 life sentences on that 2011 indictment, and when they offered me 0 to 5 years at 68 years old, it looks pretty inviting rather than looking at 3 mandatory life sentences.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, when we've talked about the problems with that and pleas, and that is just an incredible problem that we're going to continue to cover. I wish we had more time with George Christie, former president of the Hells Angels Ventura Chapter. He's also founder of Felony Prison Consultants. It's so great to speak to you. I mean, it's just absolutely fascinating, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity.